Finals Week 2 has come and gone, and we now know the two teams who have the honour of progressing to the preliminary finals and getting smashed by Melbourne and Penrith. But in all seriousness, I've actually come out of that last weekend feeling a lot more positive about the chances that these sides have of pulling off an upset against the top two. Am I kidding myself? Probably, but ignorance is bliss. We'll start off with having a look at the Sharks win over the Cowboys to finally end their 6-season-long finals winning drought. I did see this coming. I tipped Cronulla to win this game, but what I didn't see is the way that they would be just so dominant in that first half. While it was clear that the Cowboys did carry belief out of halftime, realistically when you're down 24-0 in a finals game, you're not coming back. The Sharks won this game with their second phase play, which is really just a fancy way of saying that they killed the Cowboys with their offloads. So much so that by the end of the game, the Sharks had offloaded over twice as much as the Cowboys had. All of their first three tries involved risky offloading, and none more so than their first one, the Braden Trindall penalty try. So the Sharks ran it on the fifth tackle, which is a risk in itself. Kyle Ero is wrapped up by Kyle Felt and offloads it to Braden Trindall, who gives it on to Teague Wilton. Wilton logically gives it off to the faster player in Hines, but he's wrapped up himself and gets away another desperate offload. So Wilton picks it up again and gives it off to Kennedy, who, you guessed it, is wrapped up by Scott Drinkwater. Only after that offload does Braden Trindall finally find the ball back in his hands, and obviously we all know how that plays out. So for all the talk of deficiencies exposed for the Cowboys, even at the start of the Sharks' first half blitz, North Queensland were turning up. They were managing to scramble and tackle the Sharks, they just couldn't wrap the ball up. And Cronulla were extremely willing to chance their arm again and again, and it just kept working for them. Two other things that I want to say on that play. One is shout out to Tom Dearden, who comes across and realises that his fullback Scott Drinkwater is out of position. So he takes it upon himself to ensure that there is a fullback there on that play. Obviously, as we know, in the opinion of the referee, Trindall would have beaten him to the ball anyway, but at least he was there to make a contest of it. And that brings me on to my second thing, the rule for the penalty try. The rule states that you award a penalty try in an instance where the video ref believes that if not for the infringement, a try would have been scored. Now I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that he has to be 100% sure that a try would have been scored. It essentially just means that a try probably would have been scored. Now I watched this game on Channel 9 and every single one of their commentators incorrectly stated that the video ref has to be 100% sure. They used that to say that they disagreed with the bunker's decision and implied that the Cowboys were dudded by it. In keeping with my last video, it is yet another instance where the bunker actually applied the rule correctly, but there'll now be a massive group of people who watch the Channel 9 broadcast and feel that the Cowboys were dudded by a bad call. Even if you personally think that Tom Dearden would have reached the ball before Braden Trindall, this is actually a really rare instance where you cannot debate that the bunker got this decision wrong because it only continges on the video referee's opinion. You could disagree with his opinion, but you could not argue that the rule was incorrectly applied. The next try came in the following set. Hines put a very high quality kick up that was tapped back by Ronaldo Mulitalo, and Braden Trindall again desperately offloaded to find Cam McInnes. Yet another ad-lib offload. Then for the third try, you had another bat back into an offload by Jesse Ramian to find Braden Trindall again, who had brilliant awareness to track around the outside of Ramian once he identified that the chance was on. It capped off the third highlight reel moment from what was a brilliant performance from Braden Trindall. The 5'8" picked himself up 2 tries, a try assist, 106 running meters, and kicked for a whopping 635 meters. For context, that's the most any player has kicked for in this final series, with the next best being DCE's 537 meters in week 1. Trindall essentially beat the next best by 100 meters. But I think crucially, in a week where there was so much scrutiny over Nicho Hynes, with people like Greg Alexander even questioning his position in the team, his performance here was noteworthy. He did very well in the moments where he was called upon, but what stands out a lot more to me is what he didn't do. It takes a very mature halfback to realise that his 5'8" has the hot hand and take a step back, especially in a week where your season is on the line and you face so much criticism for not delivering in finals games. Could you imagine if he'd taken that exact same step back and the Sharks hadn't won? The media would be absolutely tearing into him for not delivering on the big stage. I think it just shows how fickle the NRL media can be at times. Briefly on the Cowboys, and I will do a season review on each team where I go much more in depth into their performance across the year, but I think Todd Payten was very honest in his press conference in saying that they'll only ever really be a mid-table team until they can sort out their consistency. Cameron Smith has a saying that when the finals come around, your performances directly reflect all the little habits that you've shown across the season. I think that's particularly true for the Cowboys. In their final game, they showed that while they can put on points very easily when they want to, they can at times be very outcompeted by their opposition. All in all, a very positive Sharks performance where they showed just the faintest glimmer of hope that they may be able to push through Penrith next week. Then you had the second game on the Saturday night between the Roosters and the Seagulls in front of over 40,000 people. A game that was as intense as any finals game can hope to be, particularly in the opening stages. Manly fans will remember this game for the nightmare opening first two tackles in which Tolutau Kola and Jake Trbojevic were both sent for HIAs, with Kola not returning for the rest of the game. That being said though, their side well and truly showed up in the contact despite those two early losses. In the first 10 minutes or so, it was the Seagulls who dominated the tackle nearly every time. This was a game in which the class simply rose to the top, and once the Roosters did get on the board, there was never really a point in this game where I felt like they looked like losing. Much like the Sharks the night before, they were not afraid to throw the ball around, and it worked wonders for them. James Tedesco well and truly stood up in this one, notching up 2 tries, 2 try assists, 2 line breaks, 3 line break assists, and 226 running meters. That's a hell of a knock for a player who, this time last year, a lot of people were calling for to retire. Remember that, Chad? How wild was that? That was genuinely a prevailing opinion among NRL fans. Some of you guys are crazy. Anyway, I'd say that this was the Roosters' best performance of the season, and probably their first genuine 80-minute performance all year. They do now run into that same problem though that they've had all year, in that they can't deliver against the other top 4 sides. And the Storm in Melbourne is probably the hardest road trip in the NRL this year. I will say this though, this time last year they went down to Melbourne significantly more under strength than they are this year, and they would have got the job done if not for a miracle last play try from Will Warbrick. This year is obviously a very different Storm side, but it's a different Roosters side too. Don't get me wrong, I still think the Storm win and probably win well, but after that Roosters performance, I think it's a lot less of a foregone conclusion than I first thought. We say it all the time about this side, but they are stacked. Like, I think if you compared them player by player with the Storm, Melbourne would only win 3 or 4 positions. But the Storm have objectively been the better team this year. We saw the Roosters step up in their performance against the Seagulls, and they're going to have to do that again against the Storm if they have any hope of progressing to the grand final. As I say, I do think that it's going to be a Storm Panthers grand final. I said that at the start of the final series, and I definitely haven't wavered on that since. But while maybe this is just me wanting to get my own hopes up about how many genuine contenders we have, I believe that there is a genuine chance that one of them might not make it. And look, it is easy to fall in love with the two sides that won in a week where Melbourne and Penrith are out of sight and out of mind. But just let me live in my delusions. So anyway, that's my rundown of week 2 of the finals. Who impressed you and which 2 teams do you think will make the grand final? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.